Hey, yo, little man, what's going on? This is finally the Amaryllis guide for Edison format. I recently went to the World Championship qualifier, pew 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 based Edison format. Under 300 people have competed, and I have managed to get third place at this event. Very excited overall. The deck that I got third with was Amaryllis Burn itself. Now, I wanted to make a nice little guide here, just kind of explaining some of my card choices overall, and just getting through the deck. But yes, just to prove that this is me. I won this this giant Black Rose Dragon here that I eventually got rid of. Really popping off over the last week. So thank you so much for the support that everyone has been giving to me so far. It really means a lot for me, to kind of inspired me to make this video overall, and trying to go through some of my other card choices. But for the time being, I'm really celebrating this third place a lot more than usual. Like, I am this guy. I understand. Like, this guy right here, no one wants to, but I am going to be that guy for a little bit, because, and you see over here, Matt K and a true hero just looking at me just being an absolute animal. So welcome to the Edison format Amaryllis Ultimate Guide. My name is Nick Trudden. My Discord and my dueling book name is Straight Outta Compton, and I'm part of Team Little Bot. So we're going to be having more videos in this channel coming up, but I wanted to go through some of the things I'm going to be going over today. So we're going to be going over a little bit of a three-part series. The deck theory, kind of like going over like my thoughts on the deck, kind of my journey until how I got here. The side deck plan, since this is the thing I've gotten the most questions on, it's like, how do I even side deck with this incredibly based side deck overall, and then overall the tournament report and other cards to consider. So we're going to be going through all those things. Whether it's going to be in multiple parts, I've not made up my mind yet. It depends how well this video goes. Just tell me what you like to hear, and I'll give the people what they want, because this is some people champion status right here. Some base deck lists, base content all day long. So first, deck theory, right? So wanted to go over what like Cluster Amaryllis is, and kind of like how I got to where I was. I have been playing the deck for about a year and a half now, pretty much ever since Carpath tarped with his initial list. Volcanic counters in the main, Wayne Blasts, Raiko's Mill, all that fun stuff, right? One of the things that I felt like was not, needed was the counters themselves. I was playing the deck over and over again, and it just felt like that it wasn't needed, and it didn't support Amaryllis the best that it could be. So I kind of took it away from a little bit more of a burn deck and a little bit more of like this control aggro deck. Titania is like one of the most craziest cards in the format. It's a negating targeting on legs. It makes your frog matchup like absolutely like 90-10, like unlosable, all that fun stuff. So and also too, like Amaryllis is not like, the main point of it is not to like burn. It's more for it to come back over and over again, create a whole ton of pressure. Forces your opponent to answer the card literally every single time, right? Like, because if it goes unanswered, it just goes to attack on the following turn. It just starts, doing an insane amount of damage, which just attacks off that one card. The other thing that I noticed too is the faster that you get into Amaryllis in the rotation, the higher likelihood that you start winning. The deck loses when you don't see it. Like that's pretty much what I've noticed for most of the parts. So trying to incorporate ways in which we see the card more, how to play with the deck so you could increase your chances or your odds of milling particular cards after you do some searches, some basic stuff like that. But yeah, the faster you get that card in the rotation, the faster that you win. It's not like, Volcanic Counter where like you sometimes get into the graveyard and you don't have anything like that. But, and of course too, complementing Amaryllis with the equip spell package and recycling resources. I think that's like one of the biggest thing here. The Hidden Armory DDR Mark of the Rose package just complements this list so well. You're able to reuse the Lone Fires, pull other plants out of your deck, increase your plant count for the graveyard, because the idea here is that you want to get Amaryllis into rotation. And if you get multiples into rotation, just coming back every single turn, and you're managing the amount of plants that you're able to put into your graveyard between putting them back from the banish pile to the field into the grain forest, such as Lone Fire Blossom, you're going to start winning games a lot, or start taking over games a lot more per se. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about more or less was the millers, and the point that I want to kind of bring home here is speed is key. On a lot of initial lists, I saw a lot of Raikos, just Raiko in charge, and then Card Trooper or Morphing Jar, and that's like kind of about it. But I started realizing that Raiko was just very, very slow, or was getting slower as kind of the format started to evolve and people started to play different strategies. Raiko just felt like it was not like cutting it in that regard, right? However, I always kind of went three. So that's kind of where the Charge of the Light Brigade comes in, because supplemented third for this and Lila. Now I want to talk about Lila for a little bit, because this card is very important in a lot of different fashions. One, it's a bottomless baiter. You don't want your Amaryllis to get bottomless. You want this to get bottomless. Number two, it's a great DDR target if it is bottomless. One of my like favorite plays is like getting bottomless and then DDRing it back and just killing the other back row, and then milling a bunch of cards at the end phase, hoping that you were able to get that. Also, it helps. It's like better going second than Raiko is. Whenever you set a monster or your opponent set a monster, it's always Raiko. 90% of the time it is Raiko. However, like I just felt like, with charge in Lila is if you charge for Lila, you mill 6 on your end phase. You increase your chance of having a plant and an Amaryllis into rotation. And then your opponent is kind of left with the decision of whether to kill the Lila or the Amaryllis, because the Amaryllis is just going to get aggressive on the following turn, and then Lila is just going to stop you from setting back row, essentially. So it's also like a spellcaster, so you can make Tempest Magician in the extra deck, which doesn't come up a whole lot, but it is important for the sense of like being able to go second and at least try to trade with things before you start rolling into your Amaryllis, or at least trying to get your deck going. So I always felt that's a little bit more proactive than just kind of relying on Raiko and like Card Trooper for like milling things. Foolish is staple. There's nothing to talk about that. Morphing Jar comes out a lot going second against like a lot of different strategies, but like I like Jar, where I just kind of like, if I have a handful of monsters, I just set it and set it back row to protect it, or a handful of spells, and then you can set all your spells on the following turn to kind of bluff you having Jar and then flipping the Jar and just getting +5. So I still think that card is absolutely mandatory. It's so necessary and important. And now, why more plants, right? So we talked about the millers of being able to get certain plants into the grave. Now, what does that look like here? A lot of the core of this engine is directly from the card path list. So like the triple Titanials, the triple Amaryllis, the triple Hidden Armory, the triple Tradon, Dandy, Lone Fire Mark, DDR. Those are staple. I don't think you could deviate at any fashion away from any of those 18 cards right there. It's you have to stay within that that card count overall, especially this plant count too, because like the plants in this format are just like not really good. Like you don't really have a lot of broken options like Glow Up Bulb or Spore or anything like that. I mean, if you did, the saucy sauce would come out, but we're unfortunately not there yet, right? A couple more months if Tangle Plant format gets more popular, but we lose our Dandy and Lone Fire. But anyway, I'm digressing. I opted for higher plants. So Lord Poison and Bot Lion are in the deck for 2 reasons. One, they're just better to draw than count. These cards like actually do something. Like they actually either kill monsters. They're defensive options. They are they float a little bit harder. I mean, Lord Poison, yes, Bot Lion knows, but Bot Lion sticks a little bit harder. Bot Lion can get big. Lord Poison is damage step Titanial card. Essentially, you crash, you get a Titanium out of the graveyard. And also, like when you mill the cards, it kind of does like mill them. It does the same job as counter, and it means that like it fuels Amaryllis. So like you're happy kind of milling any of those plant monsters as well, but you're more happier here where they're drawing them. So that's kind of why I led with these, and it improves your Blackwing matchup, Gladiator Beast matchup, like those like weird aggro decks that like sometimes you just need to summon a monster that's bigger than their monsters and you Exodia them. And that card quality is obviously very important. Also, too, like they synergize a lot better with Mark of the Rose and DDR. You have a lot more plant options with Mark, so that you could get a little bit more recursive. There's moments where I could activate Mark 2 or 3 times, like pretty comfortably, and so that's why it's something that I preferred there. DDR obviously being another great staple. Like honestly, DDR discard Titanium, get back Poison, crash, get back the Titanium, discarded. One of my favorite plays. Just like all good stuff overall. But that's overall why I kind of led with a little bit more of a plant direction, because like I expected more of those like aggro decks and more And also too, like Titanial is an absolute house at this time because the Frog Hero deck is like very popular, and this deck just like messes up frogs like no one else's business. So like being able to stick like those monsters aside Titanial gives it additional negates for it to so you're just not trading one for one with Titanial all day. They need multiple targeting things, and usually by that point they blew through their resources and are able to come back and just crush them. Temple aggression and control. So these are kind of like the other things I wanted to talk about within the deck that are not really like well played or not always played. Brain control being one of them. I see the rationale with like not having redundancies between like brain control and also Mark II. If we were in a more like Hamster Ryko Caius, more sets oriented format, I would probably throw brain control over to the side deck, but it does improve your Blackwing matchup and like your those little like weird aggro control decks a lot more than where they are before. There was a lot of moments where I literally activated Mark and brain control, took their two biggest monsters, summoned my dude, and just like attacked for the game. It is a burn spell on its own, and I think it should be treated as such. I would never not play that card. I think I was not playing it for a long time up until like a couple months ago, and completely regretted not even playing it ever because it's just such a beast of a card. It's the best card in the format, so you got to like kind of play it. Call the Haunted is another interesting one that I kind of have in here that a lot of Amaryllis lists kind of do not play, especially with this version where there's a little bit more millers. Your quality of your mills go up. So if you have like, if you mill like a Dandy or a Sangan or a Card Trooper or any of that, like, and Call's going to get destroyed, it's easy bait so that you can minus opponent, get a plus off that. All that fun stuff. Also, like getting back Lone Fire to tribute it off, and then like, and then it's a dead call. And if you make Brio, you can put it back in the hand, and you can do all of it's. Call the Haunted is just like one of the most insane trap cards in the format, and I think it's like a very relatively underrated card in this format as well. So I just wanted to touch on that, and also like Phoenix Wing Bust. This card is just like my favorite trap card like ever in Yu-Gi-Oh. Setting your opponent back a turn is so important, especially like because Amaryllis is like conditioned to some of this stuff is like kind of slow. It's like your end phase. You need to like it helps with that tempo and that control element within the format. And also like spinning back like the Blackwing fusion so they can't like value them out of the graveyard and like get free pieces, or their zeros, or their like anything of that nature. Like just having this chainable trap card is just so important, especially when you have so many good discards. And the other good thing too is that excuse me, you're going to hear that because I don't know how to edit yet, but we'll learn how to do that. But anyways, you don't have to like roll. You can discard like the bot line and the Lord Poison as well. Like because it does fuel you put a plant card in the graveyard essentially for Amaryllis itself. So overall, it's a very strong card. It's kind of like an easy side deck out too. So which is why I inherently play for the most part. Now, the side deck plan. I've gotten more questions on this side deck more than like anything else in my main deck. It seemed that like my main deck was pretty clear cut and dry for people, but like this side deck was kind of like all over the place. And I kind of want to break this down and take some time to like really just implement to guys of why I did the things that I did. So Volcanic Counter, I've been obviously looks like I've been railing on this card a little bit. However, it's not like a bad. It's bad, but like not in like a very bad way, right? They are mandatory, which is like horrible, and you need another fire in the graveyard for it to burn damage, right? So when you have Lone Fire and like Phoenixian, like those are the only two fires, and then like maybe making Black Rose like once or twice or whatever. So it doesn't really like come up as often. But we're gonna kind of dive into that package a little bit. I kind of broke down the side deck the same way I kind of broke down some of the things before. So we're just gonna kind of roll through this really quickly. So the Counter Comedian package. So this is like the package that I'm kind of calling it. So you have Volcanic Counter, Burial, Card Destruction, and then Fiend Comedian. So I wanted to talk about Fiend Comedian a little bit because when I kind of like stumbled across this card and started pulling this in the deck, I just started winning games that I really should have not won, like at all. You toss a coin and you call it right. If you call it right, you banish their entire graveyard. And if you call it wrong, you mill cards from the top of the deck to your graveyard up to the amount of cards in their graveyard. So two very big effects right there that could happen, and either of them are worthwhile. So I really wanted to sport this card a lot more because of how much of a blow it is becoming in a lot of my matches. Now, the best way to complement it is Volcanic Counter itself. Like, if I can mill like 10, 15 cards and have them be 2 counters, that improves my quality of mills. Your card quality in your hand stops mattering like a little bit because of this card, but like that's kind of the reason why I put it. It's almost like the counters support Comedian a little bit more, because I just don't think that Plague, Necro, Amaryllis, or Dandelion is just enough. You really want to make sure that if you were to miss, like it's rewarding you a lot. And like oftentimes you really want one effect to go off over another. And that's why it kind of comes down to a little bit more of a dice rolly card, but either effect is really powerful. Card destruction comes in because like one of the things too is that like when you're playing the counters, every hand that you open, you're like, gee, I really wish this card destruction. If you're saying that your hand needs card destruction a lot, it's probably because like your card quality is terrible. So like when you put counters in, you have to throw in card destruction. Also, too, it helps out with being Comedian because it puts more cards in their graveyard to either like get rid of or for you to mill more cards off your deck. So it complements being Comedian in that regard. So that's why like there's the synergies between Comedian, card destruction, and Volcanic Counter. It just better supports Comedian against those combo decks in Edison format. So and also to Burial from a Different Dimension. It comes in game 2 and game 3 like every single match anyway, because like they side in their crows, or if they're putting bottoms in their main deck, they will, or deep prisons or whatever. You need to make sure that you're saving your Amaryllis from that per se, and being able to just put them back in the graveyard, recycle resources. And it is really broken with counter. We're not going to lie here and Steve. There's a lot of moments where I reuse several counters just for crashing Danny tokens or whatever that might be. But that's kind of like the package. And then now, what the side out for this package? Because like that's the other thing. People were just not like, I guess, like seeing it, and it's really understandable because this is very not a traditional side deck option. It is almost like a smoke screen into a more burn aggressive strategy, and this is where you side up more against some of the combo decks. So as you see here, traditionally it's Lila, Botline, Lord Poison, the plants, the additional Miller, Wing Blast, Trade in, and Call as like the first 6 cards. The 7th and 8th card, I'm going to kind of go over into other cards to side out for the specific package, or other cards to side out in tandem with these. Traditionally, when it comes to side decking, my preference is that like I don't like to side a lot of cards. There's sometimes I only side like 1, 2 cards per matchup, especially when it's like, you know, Black Wings, or if it's like, you know, a hero bead or anything like that. Like the Fiend Comedian works well against like the Future Fusion. You have 5 cards in your graveyard immediately. Substitute puts like 11 cards in your opponent's graveyard immediately. Lightsworn variants, just Chrysia Swarm, Practical Lightsworn, just stuff, Glorious Illusion Lightsworn, all that fun stuff. They put cards in their graveyard really quickly. That's where Comedian takes advantage, just so you could either catch up or just blow them out regardless, even if they have a very strong start. So the cards on the bottom like are usually typically taken out. You don't need like Poison or Bottom or Lion or anything like that, because sometimes like the ceilings of your opponent's deck is like way too high for Poison and Botline to really thrive. And with that, you also try to like Call the Haunted and stuff like that too. Like I don't think like cards like that are really necessary, especially if like the quality and cards that you want to revive out of your graveyard are not quite there. So those are typically sided outs. So an additional side outs based on matchup, like these are all cards that I've sided out in relation to this package, as well as like other things. Obviously, it depends on the card, the matchup itself, right? Trap Dust Shoot has been really feeling a little bit more on the lackluster side. It feels like the best decks right now are the ones that get like the least bothered by Dust Shoot, or can play around Dust Shoot the hardest, or like be able to set cards and like, you know, like on their first turn, so Dust Shoot's dead. So I find myself taking out a lot going second. Jars, the same thing. I find myself taking out a lot going second. Heavy MST, they get removed against the Frog matchup. And also, like, if it's not like, and some of the Lightsworn matchups too, so those are typically taken out. Sangan, I try to keep him in because, like, it's the third Lone Fire Blossom essentially, and Lone Fire counts as like almost 3 plants in this deck as you were fueling for Amaryllis. And then Mirror Force is obviously a little bit more matchup dependent on whether it's an aggressive strategy or not. So depending on whether you're going, and that's the thing, like I want to at least like give you guys like a good core cards to move, but a lot of these what you side in and versus what you side out is based on matchup and whether you're going first and going second. And there's a whole ton of different decision trees for that. I could go into that in a different video if you like, but I kind of wanted to give a round out answer for that. And when to sign in the counter comedian package. So, so yes, like I said, the Lightsworn variants, they know all their cards, dragon variants, like put all their, listen, when they future fusion and you flip being comedian, you banish their whole graveyard, you exodiate them, like they're just relying on mass dragons, you just destroy them. Frog variants, and even occasionally like value turbo. When I'm seeing a little bit more Lilas, or I see Lila plus a little bit more of a chaos package, I might go like an additional comedian in, like one comedian in, one comedian like out. But occasionally, depending on like what you see in that matchup, that's like very important. And the things that you don't side the comedian package, then Blackwings counter is not good against Blackwings, like at all. And the reason why is because like they have all these piercers that you play kind of passively with, and then they just summon 5,000 points worth of damage and just blow you right through anyway. They're a fast starting deck, so if they take out a significant amount of your life points, your counters are not going to be as valuable, especially when the value of the counters come with you having more life points at the end of the day. So those type of aggressive decks, you just side them out on, and also too, like Blackwings don't like send things to the graveyard like quickly unless it's like those value turbo kind of strategies. Glad Beast, another one too, like bot lines and Lord Poison combats some of those stronger cards that are within the deck. Unfortunately, like Glad Beast is like, if they go Laquari step 5, that's like Exodia against like everything anyway. Glad Beast is also like not in a good spot in the meta game. Like you have all these Blackwings and Hero Beats deck that just like they lose the 1900 vanillas. Like, what are you gonna do? God, I hate this deck. Who likes this deck? Leave a comment in the description if you actually like this deck, right? Because yikes. But yeah, Hero Beat, very same deal. And then like zombies too. Zombies are like in like a weird spot where like you kind of sometimes fuel their return. They don't mill a whole ton. They're more like getting the pieces together and then pushing. I think like you got to worry about Revive King a little bit more, and that's like the big card against this deck. So like those are some of the examples of what I would side this in versus like what I would not side this in. It's all dependent on like how comedian matches up against the matches, because I just do not feel confident just bringing in, and nor do I think it's good to bring in counters when you do not have an additional mill resource like that. Countering aggro decks. So this is kind of like the little package that I have for some of the more aggressive decks in the format. Like obviously Cyber Dragons being that. And I have going first versus going second on here, in the sense that like I do side Cyber Dragon going second sometimes, like against like the Raikou decks, and just because like I want to maintain tempo and I don't want like a first turn Raikou to determine like the pace of the game, because as we know in Edison, like the first 3 or 4 turns like matter the most in the whole game, and like this is probably one of the more dice rolly formats, in dice rolly retro formats per se, simply because of of like Raikou and its presence. So like that's where Cyber Dragon kind of comes in for, as well as some of the machine stuff as well. Bottomless is kind of self-explanatory, like you need the Gladiator Beast and all that fun stuff. Cylinder is a card I side against, Blackwings and Gladiators and stuff like that. Blackwings, it's absolutely hilarious when they try to pump through. They're salivating at the jawline, and then their 5,000 attack board just gets like flipped right back to them, and then you just proceed to take over the game from that point. It's so good, but at the same time too, like whenever my opponent sees it, whether I flip on it or whether I mill it, it comes immediately out afterwards, and they just play around it for the rest of the match because they don't want to pump their boros anymore and just take a whole ton of damage. So that's why Cylinder's in there. It's a very good, and it happened a lot where it did change my opponent's mind of thinking when I was playing the Blackwing matchup, especially since like they pump the way in which Blackwings beat plans consistently is by pumping their boros up and pushing over. Vortex is like a solid piece of removal. It comes in against like some of this card stuff, like Lightning Vortex and clearing a field, whether it's tokens or frogs or some more aggressive strategies. It depends whether you're going first or going second too. I typically like the side in going second more so than going first. And then you're just SOL against Gladbeast. Yeah, I just kind of like accepted defeat against this deck. I just assume that these Hero B players, these black ones, are just going to trash this deck. So I don't want to turn this into a Gladiator Beast trash video, but even though I've alluded to it quite some time before. But yeah, you're kind of SOL, and that's the deck. I'm not doing the best CRE. You just don't see enough Glads anymore, and they're just not in a good spot within the meta. So that's kind of one thing to think about there. And then the last thing here is the Floodgates. So the Floodgate theory in Edison format. I guess like Floodgates are just not really like, they're impactful, but they don't like flat out would win the game the way that they do in future formats. So these are the two I opted to go with. One decree being like, you don't want to ever see multiple. These are both cards you never want to see multiples of, like ever, especially when a deck that like needs multiple cards to come together to be able to combo, right? So if you just see them once, you're usually fine. I gotta say the decree is like very, very strong. It's better against like some of those back row decks, like decree plus titanium and a bunch of things to protect it is usually GG. And skills range just complements Amaryllis as well, in the sense that like you can flip Amaryllis to attack and it just doesn't die with it, and the skill range just turns off all of those harder combo decks. So I kind of characterize side decking between like combo, control, and what the side against that. Obviously, skill drain's more for the combo decks. Decree's more for the control decks, since trap cards are used as a mean to control a lot more within Edison format itself. And then I wanted to kind of go over some of the extra deck oddities too. Obviously, we don't really talk about the extra deck because it's like Ghost format. The extra deck is kind of like generic and, well, it's not unlimited, right? But whatever. It's a different conversation for a different day. And that's okay. But here are some of the oddities that I had in the extra deck itself. Dark End, Tempest Magician, and Queen of Thorns. So Dark End, as you noticed in my initial list, I don't have a non-dark monster outside of the cards in my extra deck to make it. However, with Brain Control and Mark of the Rose, you could take Caiuses, you could take Chaos Sorcerers, you take like kind of anything under the sun and make this. It's the best synchro in the format, and if you have space, you should probably play it. So it didn't come up for me this past weekend, but it's come up for me a lot in testing and other local events as well. And then Tempest Magician here, it is a discard card, which is very nice, because if you have like some of the Amaryllis or too much normals, it's not a bad idea to just chuck your hand and start burning for things. It doesn't come up a whole lot though. I did Tempest Magician some my top 8 opponents with it, which is like cool and whatnot, but it is there to like kind of, it's awkward in the sense that like Plague requires you to stack a card and then you get it with the Lila the synchro, and then you make this card, and you don't really have enough moments where like you're just starting and burning for game. But sometimes when they're at like 2,000 or 2,500, you just chuck your whole hand, bring back all of your Amaryllises, and then like you just kind of checkmate them there with not being able to like destroy any of the Amaryllises, and usually the game is over. Queen of Thorns, this card came in my extra deck probably 3 days before the event because I read it and I was like, wow, holy shit, like that's a good card. Oh, cursing, say that. Anyways, you need a tuner and a non-tuner plant monster. So Bot Lion and Lord Poison, essentially. It's a plant monster itself, so when it does die, you can use it for Amaryllis and then get it back with DDR. Essentially what this card does is, whenever a non-plant monster is normal or special summon on your opponent's field, they have to pay 1,000 life points to do it. So it's a lot like Chain Energy. It's an interesting card in theory. I wish it summoned from the deck too, or the graveyard, but unfortunately that's just not how this card works. But like sometimes when your opponent is low enough and you make this card, you theoretically should be able to win the game, in the sense that like you have to commit more resources, pay all this life points, and you just have this like Chain Energy-esque card in your extra deck. And that's something that I like really liked and enjoyed about it, but like it just did not come up in tournament at all. Even though I wanted to think about it and just summon it for the lulz, it just didn't happen. So, but that's kind of all for part 1 here. I really wanted to give a shout out to all of my opponents that I have played, everyone that I met over the weekends. Everyone was so supportive. I'm excited to do an additional tournament report later on, but I wanted to get my initial thoughts out on my list and some of my theory on the side deck especially, but also alongside the main deck as well. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. please consider liking, subscribing, just so I can continue to put these things forward and make Edis format and other retro formats, because we play a whole ton of retro formats here on Little Man Yugioh. Everyone, have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you all later. See ya.